Right now, over 500 Chinese military satellites are watching every American base, every aircraft carrier, every troop movement across the Pacific. The United States has roughly 250 satellites to counter them. 10 years ago, China operated fewer than 100 spy satellites. Today, they have more reconnaissance satellites than America for the first time in history. That's a 520% increase in a single decade. These aren't just cameras in space, they're the targeting system for weapons designed to sink American aircraft carriers before they ever reach a fight. According to the Department of Defense's December 2024 report on Chinese military power, Beijing now operates over 510 satellites with intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities. Here's how that breaks down. The Yaogan series, 144 reconnaissance satellites launched since 2006, roughly 130 remain active. These carry optical cameras, synthetic aperture radar, and electronic intelligence sensors. The Gaofen series, 32 satellites officially classified as civilian, but with sub-meter resolution, capable of reading license plates from orbit, dual use, military access confirmed. The Jilin-1 commercial constellation, over 100 satellites operational, 300 planned by end of 2025, marketed to businesses but integrated into military targeting networks. And then there's the G60,000 sales mega-constellation, 90 satellites launched as of mid-2025, 648 planned by year's end, 14,000 by 2030. 14,000. Now, compare that to what America has. The legendary KH-11 keyhole satellites, 5, maybe 6 operational. Each one costs between $2 and $5 billion, arguably the most advanced imaging satellites ever built. The NRO's new proliferated constellation, around 200 satellites deployed in 2024 and 2025, the largest government-operated satellite fleet in U.S. history. Commercial partnerships, Planet Labs, Maxar, another 50 or so providing supplementary imagery, total American ISR capability, approximately 250 satellites. China has twice as many, and they're launching faster. In 2024, China conducted 68 orbital launches, deployed 260 satellites, 26% dedicated to reconnaissance. The United States? The NRO went from deploying 4 satellites in 2023 to 110 in 2024. That sounds like progress, but China's launch rate in 2025 is already 30% higher than last year. So, what can 500 satellites actually see? If you want to understand how China is reshaping global power before the headlines catch up, hit subscribe. Thank you. The USS Ronald Reagan Carrier Strike Group enters the South China Sea. 11 ships, 65 aircraft, 5,000 sailors. They were never alone. Chinese reconnaissance satellites tracked the Reagan continuously. According to U.S. Naval Institute reporting, China conducted 314 ship days of maritime reconnaissance in the South China Sea in 2023, concentrated in a triangular zone between the Paracel Islands, the Spratly Islands, and the Bashi Channel, the exact route American carriers must transit to reach Taiwan. And they weren't just watching from orbit. Kayangxing-class intelligence vessels shadowed the carrier group on the surface. Yaogan satellites provided overhead coverage. Electronic intelligence assets intercepted communications. Every radar emission, light operation, logged, analyzed, fed back to Beijing in real time. In December 2023, China launched Yaogan 41. This isn't like the others. Yaogan 41 sits in geostationary orbit, 22,000 miles up, and it doesn't move relative to Earth. It provides persistent, unblinking surveillance over the entire Western Pacific, 24 hours a day. And in March 2025, something else happened. U.S. Space Force reported that Chinese satellites conducted simulated on-orbit interception maneuvers. They weren't just watching us, they were practicing getting closer. But surveillance alone doesn't win wars. The question is, what do you do with what you see? For 30 years, the United States followed a doctrine called exquisite satellites. The idea was simple. Build fewer satellites, make each one extraordinarily capable, except that they cost billions of dollars because their intelligence value was irreplaceable. The KH-11 Keyhole series exemplified this philosophy. Resolution so precise it remains classified. Sensors so advanced they could detect camouflage techniques designed specifically to fool them. 5 satellites, maybe 6, at any given time. Lose one, and you've lost 20% of your capability. China chose differently. Their philosophy, quantity equals quality. Build 500 satellites at $50 to $300 million each, except that any individual satellite is less capable. But the constellation, the network, the timeline tells the story. 2010. China operates roughly 50 ISR satellites. The United States has 150. 2015. China reaches 100. America has 180. 2020. Parity. Both nations at approximately 200. 2025. China, 510. United States, 250. The lines crossed and kept going. But why didn't America respond sooner? Budget priorities. The U.S. Space Force invested heavily in GPS satellites, 31 birds maintaining the navigation constellation the entire world depends on. Missile warning systems, protected communication satellites. Reconnaissance? The assumption was commercial imagery would fill the gap. Planet Labs, Maxar, private companies launching hundreds of small satellites. The flaw in that logic? Commercial satellites aren't designed for contested environments. They can't be rapidly retasked. They don't carry hardened electronics. They weren't built for war. China built their commercial constellations with military integration from day one. So now America is catching up, but is it fast enough? Here's what 500 satellites make possible. The DF-26, NATO designation, Guam Killer. Range, 4,000 kilometers, enough to reach Guam, the Philippine Sea, the second island chain. And it carries another name, Carrier Killer. In the Taklamakan Desert, China built something that should concern every American military planner. Full-scale mock-ups of American aircraft carriers, including the USS Gerald R. Ford, mounted on rail systems to simulate movement. They're testing the DF-26's ability to hit a moving naval target using satellite targeting data. Imagine this scenario, a Taiwan crisis. Day 1, an American carrier strike group approaches from the Philippine Sea. Yaogan satellites detect the formation at 1,500 kilometers. Multiple satellites maintain continuous track. Revisit rate with 500 birds every 10 to 30 minutes. Sometimes faster. At 1,000 kilometers, targeting data feeds to DF-26 batteries on the mainland. Launch authorization. 4 missiles, 6 missiles, a salvo. Flight time, 10 to 12 minutes. The carrier has limited warning. Evade or intercept. If they can see it, they can hit it. That's the new reality of satellite-guided warfare. America is responding. The NRO proliferated constellation, 200 satellites operational as of 2025. The goal? 500 to 700 by 2030. Project Starshield, a partnership with SpaceX, 480 satellites planned between 2025 and 2027. The shift from exquisite to proliferated architecture is happening. Finally, but China launched 140 satellites in just the first half of 2025. Their G60 constellation targets 14,000 satellites by 2030. America can accelerate, but can it accelerate faster than a nation that spent 15 years building this advantage? In 2006, China launched their first Yaogan satellite. One satellite. Almost no one noticed. 19 years later, they have more eyes in space than the nation that invented satellite reconnaissance. This wasn't luck, it wasn't sudden, it was patience, strategy, and a bet that while America focused on perfection, quantity would win. 510 satellites watching, every base, every ship, every move. The Pentagon says they're catching up, but the question no one in Washington wants to answer, in a war that might last weeks, does catching up in 5 years matter?